Next week on EastEnders, George Knight faces a life-changing health diagnosis after suffering severe injuries. Meanwhile, Yolanda's traumatic past resurfaces when Pastor Clayton's vile actions are exposed. Patrick struggles with how to confront the truth while Billy grapples with family tensions. Secrets unravel as Walford residents face their demons. George Knight of EastEnders will have a diagnosis that will change his life. Next week, George Knight of EastEnders is going to get a health diagnosis that could change his life. George's next big week could start disastrously when he finds out from his daughters that Eddie arranged Gloria's burial without telling him. Feeling conflicted about this, George calls Rufus to set up a brawl. Gina and Anna, who are worried about their father, decide to assist George cope with his grief by hosting a memorial service for Gloria in the Vic. They even invite their half-brother Junior to attend. George is recovering from severe injuries sustained in his struggle the previous evening on the day of Gloria's memorial. Gina and Anna are upset that Junior is not coming, but things worsen when George experiences vertigo and nearly passes out. When Cindy and Phil realize what's going on, they urge that George visit the hospital. Once there, the physicians do a CAT scan on George and find that he has a brain disorder associated with repetitive head trauma. The scenario becomes more dire when the doctor warns George that one more whack to the head may be fatal. Elaine and the girls became enraged upon learning that George has been having covert fights, and Cindy was fully aware of them. Cindy finds herself in a difficult situation when she later sees George being contacted by Rufus, who offers him the money from last night and another fight. The fact that Gina and Anna won't talk to her because they are upset that she has been hiding George's boxing secret makes her difficulties much worse. After a while, they decide to have lunch together, and Cindy makes a vow to persuade George to stop fighting. Cindy then strikes up a heated discussion with George, who at first turns down her offer of using internet counseling to help him deal with his intense feelings. After she finally talks George into it, Cindy is relieved, but when he's by himself, he calls Rufus to schedule a fight for the next week. Cindy throws him an ultimatum after he tells her what he plans to do, but will this be sufficient to get him to change his mind? BBC One airs EastEnders Monday through Thursday at 7:30 p.m. ahead of its TV airing. Most episodes of the show are available for streaming on BBC iPlayer, where they are released early. Next week's spoilers for EastEnders. Patrick's initial reaction upon learning about Yolanda's attack. Next week's EastEnders spoilers state that Patrick finds out the truth regarding Pastor Clayton's attack. Even though he's enraged, can Yolanda convince him to hold back? Billy gets enraged in the meantime as Stevie keeps attempting to crawl beneath the Mitchell table. George additionally has a scary health scare. EastEnders spoilers for next week include all of this and more. 1. Patrick consults a lawyer regarding Yolanda. Patrick can't stop worrying about Yolanda. Yolanda was unaware that he was missing a doctor's appointment, so when Sonia reveals it, his displeasure intensifies. Denise becomes even more worried when Yolanda fails to show up for the food truck's debut. She advises Patrick to ask Pastor Clayton for assistance in speaking with Yolanda. Pastor Clayton says Yolanda might not be feeling well. 2. Patrick learns the reality. Yolanda becomes enraged when Patrick brings up Pastor Clayton's worries. She still finds it difficult to tell Patrick what transpired, though. Yolanda asks Elaine to clarify when she calls. After being stunned, Patrick tries to speak with Yolanda. But she shuts herself in the loo and won't speak. After realizing what has transpired, Patrick becomes enraged. He charges outside to address Pastor Clayton. In a desperate attempt to stop him from doing anything foolish, Yolanda chases after him. She implores him to return inside with her. At last, Yolanda confides in Patrick, and they talk about her experiences. Subsequently, she consents to inform the church authorities about Pastor Clayton. 3. Yolanda discloses her assault. Yolanda is adamant about seeing Levi by herself. She informs him of her sexual attack by Pastor Clayton. Levi praises her boldness and says he will look into it immediately. Patrick, on the other hand, is not pleased to learn that the meeting will not take place until the next week. In the cafe, he approaches Levi and instructs him to walk on. And Patrick can't resist approaching Pastor Clayton when he later spots him at the community center. Yolanda, though, notices and begs him to stop. Will she be able to reach Patrick? 4. Stevie makes an effort to get to know the household. Billy continues to insist that Stevie cannot be anywhere near the family. However, Stevie tries to have lunch with Lexi, Will, and Janet after running into them in the cafe. Enraged Billy visits Stevie in the pub after learning about the lunch. Will Stevie listen to his warnings? 5. Billy snaps. Billy refuses to let the kids meet their grandfather, despite Honey's entreaties. But Billy loses it when he sees Stevie and Will together in the cafe once more. Honey needs to intervene when things get dangerously close to going violent. Billy finds it terrifying that he is becoming his father. Subsequently, Billy receives advice from Phil to keep Stevie close. He advises Billy to find out why Stevie is truly returned and what his true desires are. 6. Billy is in search of clarification. Billy asks to know what Stevie wants and extends an invitation for a drink. Simply put, Stevie claims to be an elderly man who is lonely and wants to get to know his family. Is he being honest, though? Will Billy accept him, too? 7. George receives alarming medical information when the girls inform George that Gloria's burial took place without him. George is saddened. In order for George to say his own farewell, Anna and Gina plan to host a memorial in the Vic. George is receiving medical attention on the day of the memorial due to his involvement in another unlawful altercation the previous evening. In an attempt to hide it, he becomes lightheaded and nearly passes out. After realizing what has transpired, Cindy and Phil drive George to the hospital. After receiving several knocks to the head, he is brought in for a CAT scan, which reveals he has a brain disease. George is warned that taking a serious knock during one more fight could be fatal. But will he give in to logic? Cindy, Elaine, and the girls are waiting on news about George in the meantime. Cindy's knowledge of George's fighting and her refusal to disclose it to Elaine, Anna, and Gina infuriate them. 8. Cindy makes a threat against George. Gina and Anna are eventually convinced to have lunch with Cindy by her. She vows to persuade George to refrain from fighting. Cindy makes an attempt to encourage George to use internet counseling. Though George initially objects, she manages to persuade him otherwise, but soon after, George informs Cindy of his plans and sets up another argument for the following week. Then she issues him with a challenge. What will he choose? 9. Amy feels envious. Denzel makes plans to work with Ebony, an influencer. Even yet, Amy isn't overly thrilled to learn of the partnership. Walford resident acts to uncover the sealed demise of BBC EastEnders nasty Pastor Clayton. Spoilers for EastEnders reveal that Yolanda Truman's tragic narrative with Pastor Clayton will now take a different turn. As viewers are aware, Yolanda was left traumatized in previous episodes on the BBC serial opera after the pastor cruelly attacked her sexually. It was soon discovered that Yolanda was not the only victim of his abuse. During the course of the previous 10 or so years, other women were shown coming forward in flashbacks, one of whom confessed that he had sexually attacked her. Yolanda has found it difficult to handle the aftermath and, although she confided in friend Elaine Peacock, she has not yet told her husband Patrick Truman. But the following week, just as Yolanda makes a bold choice, he discovers the truth and acts accordingly. Given that his wife is acting strangely and raising severe concerns, Patrick is aware that something is seriously wrong. Although he's eager to find out, Yolanda won't engage in conversation with him. Unable to find the right words, she asks Elaine to tell her husband what occurred instead. Viewers will witness Yolanda becoming enraged the next week when Pastor Clayton suggests she's ill, knowing full well what he's done to her. When Patrick tells his wife about his worries, she is appalled as he confides in him without telling her about the attack he committed on Yolanda. At Yolanda's request, Elaine informs Patrick of the truth the following day, and he is devastated. Patrick tries to speak with Yolanda while he tries to digest what he has been told, but she locks herself in the lavatory. Soon after, he becomes enraged and goes to confront Pastor Clayton. Yolanda rushes after him after feeling compelled to stop him, and they settle down to discuss her ordeal. Yolanda resolves to report Pastor Clayton to the church authorities after talking with Patrick. When Yolanda informs Levi the following day about her sexual attack by Pastor Clayton, he commends her for her boldness and assures her that he will look into her complaint as soon as possible. However, Patrick becomes enraged at the lengthy procedure and confronts him when he learns that the meeting isn't scheduled until the next week. If nothing is done, Patrick threatens to take matters into his own hands, and before long, he's addressing Pastor Clayton. When Yolanda shows up, she begs him to stop, but will she be able to do so, and will she and Patrick be able to jointly reveal his heinous deeds? Please subscribe our channel.